So, hello, friends. Good evening and a warm welcome to Wisdom Waves, where we basically take a look at some topics by analyzing them using some philosophical methods. So, last time we used the analytical method. Today, we use the deconstruction method, and we will use this method in order to answer the question of how can we deconstruct the power behind the headlines, something that is quite common in the country that we live in. So, the procedure for the session will go like this. There will be a presentation on the topic. First, a brief presentation about the deconstruction method, followed by the actual topic of discussion, and then the floor will be open for debates or for discussions or for opinions. Okay, so let's begin with the presentation. We'll begin with first taking a look at deconstruction as a method of philosophical inquiry. So, first and foremost, deconstruction, as we all know, is a method most closely associated with Jacques Derrida, the French philosopher, and it basically involves criticizing or critically analyzing texts, concepts, or systems of thoughts in order to expose hidden assumptions, contradictions, and internal tensions. Now, deconstruction also seeks to show that concepts which are often assumed to be stable or self evident are in fact subject to interpretation as well as manipulation. And this method is especially concerned with questioning binary opposition such as good, evil, truth, falsehood, presence, absence, light, dark, male, female, which in a way dominate Western metaphysical thinking. And therefore, deconstruction in a way also challenges the privilege term. So, in the binaries, for example, between good and bad or good and evil, there's always one that is privileged. So, in this way, we see that deconstruction challenges this privilege term in these binaries by telling us that both the sides depend on one another and in ways that undermine this supposed hierarchy. So, when we look at the deconstruction of binary oppositions, one of the key features is the focus on these binary oppositions, which is the pair of opposite concepts where one term is usually given priority or assumed to be more foundational than the other. And therefore, Derrida argued that these binaries are not natural or neutral, but are constructed and maintained by historical, cultural, and philosophical forces. So, for example, in the binary between speech versus writing, we see that in Western philosophy, speech has often been privileged over writing. We see that philosophers like Plato argued that speech is closer to the truth because it is directly linked to the speaker's presence, while writing is seen as secondary, a mere representation of speech that lacks the immediacy of spoken words. Now, Derrida deconstructs this binary by showing that speech and writing are not so clearly separate. He argues that both speech and writing involve signs that are always open to interpretation and that both are detached from any fixed origin or presence. For instance, even when we speak, our words are influenced by cultural conventions or even linguistic structures, which go beyond the immediate context or moment. And therefore, writing and speech are equally dependent on the process of signification, and neither can claim priority over the other. Now, when we speak about deconstructing texts, one thing we need to remember that meaning is never fixed or the meaning is never stable. Now, traditional approaches to text always assume that the meaning is determined by the author's intention or by the clear relationship between signs, that is, the words, and the ideas or objects they refer to. Now, deconstruction will, in a way, challenge this assumption by emphasizing the fluidity and the ambiguity of language. For example, when we take a look at the deconstruction of literature, if we take a literary text like the Hamlet, the deconstructionists will look for internal contradictions and ambiguities in the text meaning. Let's take the famous line, to be or not to be, that is the question. Now, generally, we see that this would reflect Hamlet's existential dilemma. But what it exactly means, the word to be? Now, Derrida would argue that the text does not provide a single definitive answer. Instead, the meaning of to be is deferred through a process of constant interpretation. And therefore, we see that deconstruction looks for places in the text where meaning is unstable or open ended. And therefore, deconstruction will show that these multiple interpretations are not failures of reading, but they reflect the inherent stability of meaning in the text itself. Now, when we look at deconstruction and political structures, now deconstruction also has political implications, particularly in its critique of dominant ideologies and power structures. And we see that it can be used to expose how social, political, and legal systems are built on unstable foundations, which then open spaces for new forms of justice and inclusion. Now, when you look at deconstruction of legal justice, so Derrida, in his essay Force of Law, deconstructs the concept of justice in the legal system. Now, traditional legal systems claim to provide objective, impartial justice based on universal principles. However, Derrida argues that laws are never fully just because they are based on interpretations of the rules and also precedents that are themselves open to interpretations. And in a way, we see that deconstructing the law will reveal to us that justice cannot be fully captured by legal systems. Laws are necessarily incomplete and therefore must be constantly revised and reinterpreted. So he does not suggest abandoning the law, but rather recognizing its limitations and, in a way, being open to more inclusive, flexible, and context sensitive forms of justice. And deconstruction in everyday life, when we look at everyday practices, norms, and social structures, they reveal how inequalities or hidden assumptions perpetuate our day to day life. So, by questioning what is generally taken for granted, deconstruction opens up new possibilities for thinking and acting. Now, gender norms, we see that often present themselves as natural or biologically determined. But deconstruction reveals that these are socially and culturally constructed. And therefore, for example, the expectation that men should be strong and unemotional and women should be nurturing and passive is not based on biological necessity. Instead, these expectations are constructed through social practices and are then reinforced by cultural institutions. And therefore, by deconstructing these norms, we can challenge and subvert them, opening up space for more fluid and diverse expression of gender identity. And in a way, we see that deconstruction is an ongoing process. And in a way, it is not a method that will give us definitive answers or solutions, but it encourages us to think critically, to question and expose the hidden assumptions or contradictions that are there behind certain concepts and systems. With this understanding, let us come to today's topic: unmasking media, deconstructing the power behind the headlines. Now, we see that media plays a very important role in shaping public opinion, also in influencing political decisions and controlling the flow of information in digital age. It is also perceived to be the guardian of truth, providing objective and reliable reports on events that shape our world. However, sadly, Today, this statement can be contradicted and even the otherwise can be said about it. But we see that media narratives are never neutral. They are shaped by underlying power structures and ideologies that control media. And therefore, we see that there is always a presentation of selective information that serve particular political, economic, and cultural interests. So, first and foremost, we need to deconstruct media ownership. So we need to ask ourselves a question: who controls the news? We see that corporate ownership of media is a significant factor in determining what gets reported and how stories are framed. And therefore, we see that often diverse business interests own much of the mainstream media, not only in our country but also across the world. And therefore, the concentration of media ownership in the hands of a few corporations give these entities, in a way, a disproportionate control over how information is disseminated. Now, when we look at the corporate interests and media content, we see that these media corporations often have broader economic interests that go beyond the realm of journalism. And therefore, these corporations may be involved in industries such as telecommunications, oil, pharmaceuticals, or other sectors. Now, when these media firms report on topics that affect their broader business interests, we see that the integrity of the news can be compromised. So, for example, we see that much of today's media or news agencies have certain agendas towards which they cater. And as a result, sometimes certain news items can easily be sidelined, and other things which reflect the sponsorship interests can also be given more importance. Then there's also the political influence on media. So, corporate media owners are often linked to political figures, or they have their own political agendas. And therefore, media corporations may support political candidates or parties that align to their economic or ideological interests. Now, what happens here? This creates a kind of a situation where media is not an neutral informant, but media acts here as a political actor. And especially during election campaigns, we see that media can shape the public's perception of candidates by selectively focusing on certain issues or ignoring others, thus influencing voter behavior. Now, in our own country, we have plenty of examples with regards to this, right from 2014, where we see that how ads, how media campaigns were used in order to uh, give out the political agenda and also shape the perception of the voters. Now, we see that the next assumption is that framing public perception, the role of media. So, media framing, here we see that is another critical concept in understanding how narratives are constructed. Therefore, by choosing what, uh, in a way, how to report, what to report, and what to leave out, media outlets can significantly influence how the public perceives issues. And therefore, deconstructing this process involves critically examining not just the content of news stories, but also the underlying structures and assumptions that shape how they are presented. So let's take a few examples. So, for example, climate change here is a prime example of how media framing can shape public opinion. So, the scientific consensus is clear that human activities, particularly burning of fossil fuels, are driving the global climate change. However, media outlets often present climate change as a debate between two sides, giving equal weight to both climate scientists and climate change deniers. And therefore, this false balance can create confusion among the public, undermining the urgency of climate action. And therefore, the media's framing of climate change often reflects the interest of powerful industries that benefit from the continued exploitation of fossil fuels. For example, by focusing on economic costs of climate policies, media outlets can downplay the long term environmental and social consequences of not taking any action. Another issue is that of immigration. Now, immigration is another issue where media narratives are shaped by ideological and political biases. In many countries, we see that media frames immigration as a threat to national security, social stability, and economic prosperity. Immigrants are often portrayed as criminals, terrorists, or burdens on social welfare systems, which in a way contributes to this whole climate of fear and xenophobia. For example, in the US and Europe, right wing media outlets have consistently framed immigration in negative terms, using language like invasion or flood to describe the movement of migrants. And therefore, this dehumanizing language reinforces negative stereotypes, and it fosters, in a way, a sense of hostility towards immigrants. So, by focusing on isolated incidents of crime involving immigrants rather than providing a broader context, media outlets, in a way, shape the public opinion in ways that align with nationalists and also anti-immigration policy agendas. Now, next is the spread of fake news or misinformation. Now, we see that fake news and misinformation are one of the most significant issues in today's digital age. And this has been fueled by the rapid spread of information through social media and the increasing difficulty of distinguishing between what is legitimate and what is fake news. I'm sure sometimes we ourselves have been culprits, or ourselves have been victims of these forwards, either on WhatsApp or Instagram, Facebook, etc. Now, we see that social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter have been instrumental in the spread of misinformation. Now, these platforms, in a way, are designed with the intention to maximize user engagement. But often we see that it prioritizes sensational or emotionally charged content rather than giving facts and accurate information. It prioritizes the sensational news. And therefore, the algorithms that drive these platforms are not neutral. They are designed to keep the user engaged as long as possible. Why? Because for them also, then it is more economically associated, and the in the bargain we see that this leads to proliferation of fake news stories, which also reinforces our already existing biases or beliefs. Now, for example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a lot of misinformation about the virus, about vaccines, and the treatments, which were spreading so rapidly on social media. And as a result of it, this also contributed to, first and foremost, having biases over a certain section of people. It also contributed to people hesitating to take vaccines, and in a way, resistance to public health measures. And therefore, fake stories claiming that vaccines were harmful or ineffective were shared widely. And so, despite contrary evidence, the spread of this misinformation in the context had real world consequences. Now we see that there's also the political impact of fake news. Now, fake news can also have significant political implication. Now, if you take a look at the 2016 US presidential election, we see that it was marked by a widespread dissemination of fake news stories, many of which were designed to discredit political candidates or to promote conspiracy theories. The Pizzagate conspiracy theory, which falsely claimed that a child trafficking ring was being run out of a Washington DC pizzeria gained significant traction online, despite it being entirely fabricated. And therefore, we see that the spread of such fake news stories can contribute to political polarization, as people are increasingly exposed to information that already reinforces the biases and the distrust that they already have. Now, how can we combat these media biases? Here we see that we need to increase, or we need to create awareness about the biases that are already there. And this can be done by media literacy, which involves teaching people to critically analyze media content, recognize bias and misinformation, and make an informed decision about the information that people consume. For example, all of us are consumers of information when we subscribe to a particular news channel or to a particular newspaper, etc. So, first and foremost, we need to be critically minded. That means you need to see which agency is driven by what interests, and you need to cross check the information that you are receiving. Next is also you need to encourage pluralistic media, where in a way look at different sources, try to cross check, try to compare, and in a way by supporting independent media outlets which do not have any affiliation to any political or economic agencies, we see that we can create a more inclusive and representative media environment. We already have examples of journalists who have started their own independent reporting agency. Faye D'Souza is one of the examples in this. And ultimately, we can move towards a more informed society. Today, we see that information is available at the click of a button. And therefore, we need to make sure that before forwarding something, or before, in a way, reading something and spreading some information, we cross check, we check the credibility of the source, we check the authenticity of that information. Ultimately, combating this requires a joint effort. And therefore, if we are able to, in a way, create awareness, if we are able to create this critical thinking ability in the public, we will be able to, in a way, stop this spreading of fake news, and ultimately we'll be able to, in a way, convince the general public that they need to subscribe to authentic media rather than just something that fulfills their emotional feelings or sentiments. So with this, we can end with the presentation. There are a few questions which can help to facilitate our conversation or discussion. First and foremost, how does the ownership of major media outlets influence the framing of critical issues like climate change, immigration, or economic policies? And what are the potential consequences of such influences on public opinion and policy making? Next, in an age where fake news and misinformation spread rapidly, particularly through social media, how can we develop the skills to critically assess the credibility of the information we consume? And what role does media literacy play in fostering a more informed society? And finally, given the concentration of media ownership in the hands of a few large corporations, what steps can be taken to promote a more pluralistic and inclusive media landscape where which represents the diverse voices and perspectives? So with this, we can end this presentation, and now the floor is open for discussion and your views and opinions. So anyone can begin either by commenting on the question or by giving your own opinion.
Hello,
Or yeah.
good evening. This is Father Devadas.
Yes, good evening.
How do we decode an information that is given? Suppose there is a video We do not know from where it comes. How do we check the originality from where it comes? How do we do that?
Yeah, to respond to that, we see that there are, for example, when look at YouTube, there are so many things which we see are just done for gaining views. So there's also something called as clickbait, which is very much famous in these days. So ultimately, by maybe going to different sites, we can check the authenticity of those elements, because there are few trusted sites which you can go to. Few news agencies obviously do not compromise the credibility of the news. So if we look at these kind of agencies, then we can probably try to see. And obviously we see that there are certain also influencers, people who also focus on exposing these fake news. For example, Dhruv Rathi is one of the most famous personalities today, who has played a very important role, especially in the last few months, in creating a lot of awareness on certain issues affecting the country also. So I think by rather than just sticking to one source, going here and there, reflecting, or even checking online for the sources is one of the ways.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes, Professor Francis.
First of all, it was a very good presentation. It was basic, information regarding how to handle the media, and I wish there were more participants, so that especially those who aren't really aware how the media works uh, could have benefited from this presentation. I am speaking from New York all the way. I joined this one only because I am interested in the media, and also I'm a professor of the media, taught in colleges and universities and so forth. And yeah, I agree with whatever you presented. And now these days I'm in the US in New York, and I can say about the US media. US media has been, uh, totally polarized, maybe for two, 3 decades. Between, for example, if you walk into an American family who is watching Fox News, more or less you can say that their family supports the Republican Party, or at present their candidate Trump. Or if you walk into a family which is watching CNN, then you are more or less, able to say that their family supports the Democratic Party, CNN. But such a polarization hasn't really happened in India because of a couple of reasons. First of all, in India now, 95% of the media supports the regime. And therefore, there is no question of polarization in India. Uh, but when we speak about polarization in American media, although they are polarized, between parties, but they are independent. They are able to say what they want. Like, for example, in the first term of Trump, he wanted to suppress the media. But all the media, they got together and said, no, you cannot do this because at no cost you can suppress the voice of the media. So the difference is this, although the US media is polarized, they are maintaining their independence. Now, this is not the case in India. As I mentioned before, there is no polarization possible in India because 95% of the media is with the regime. And they are, all the time putting out fake news and, almost like a propaganda machine for the regime. Therefore, there's no, polarization. And therefore, I have written many things about this, and we have a lapdog media. Lapdog means. So instead of a media which will lapdog, and the opposite of that is what I forget the word now, lapdog media. So that is media that we have in India, and unfortunately, and there was only one channel, for example, in New Delhi television, NDTV, which was somewhat neutral, but even that was hostile in a hostile way, fiercely taken over by Adani. And therefore, in India, we don't have any media which is almost independent. Even some of the web channels, for example, wire.com or citizenship.org, etc., even Caravan, even the content of these web channels, the regime wants to control. So that's why they introduced the bill, the draft bill for digital media. It was purposely done to control whatever independence that is left, even in the web channel. Fortunately, because of what happened in the last election results, they had to withdraw the bill because there was a lot of opposition. Suppose the regime had got brutal majority, they wouldn't have withdrawn the bill. So this is the unfortunate situation regarding our media in India. So I won't speak more. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Lindsay, may I come in?
Yes, Vali. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much for this simple presentation. All of us can understand. I think you have covered all of the issues. And thank you to Devada's question and Professor Arakal also. Now, maybe just one or two uh, comments on based on previous question. One is how to check whether something is authentic. Of course, there are many websites today for India itself. There is something called factly.in or defract.org, factcheck.com, which is an international. I think that is where we can check, but that needs time. We need to upload a video or check a headline and see whether it is really authentic. Most of the time, it turns that it was something of 5 years ago, which is circulated today as though it happened yesterday. That's about fake news. Um, uh, Thank you, Professor Arakal, mentioning that about Indian media today, whether we are lapdogs instead of watchdog, probably. That's the word you are looking for.
Yes, yeah, there's a word I didn't get. Yes.
Yeah. Now, one of the things today we are talking about is self-censorship. There is one of the government, of course, silencing is going on. The other is something that is been very concerning is self-censorship. Because if you don't self-censor, then the big brother will come down heavily. Uh, that's happened with the NDTV probably. That's why there's a concern going on in Indian media that if you want to survive, there needs to be a unwritten self-censorship that is going on, which I think is really dangerous for democracy. Self-censorship happens probably in two ways. One is avoiding any controversy and giving non-controversial news alone, since we are talking about headlines, the headlines that are non-controversial or perhaps at par with the regime. The other is probably biggest is the evil of omission that which Lindsay also mentioned. In giving the headlines, we omit a lot of things that are important. I think that is where media is really to be, if not blamed, at least held accountable. But who will hold it accountable today? Is there really possible? Maybe only ways we, those who are at least uh, little bit educated, needs to be either self-reliant in finding what is authentic or at least check before we forward. Perhaps we have this obsession for breaking news. Yeah, whether in WhatsApp or in Facebook, we want immediately forward whatever comes to us without checking. And those of us who can check, perhaps we can say, no, this is not an authentic news. I think that's where each one of us individually can help towards this process of being authentic news rather than fake news. Yeah. Thank you very much. Others can comment on this or other points.
Yes, thank you, Vali.
Thank you very much for the enlightenment. There are so many new things happening around, but oftentimes we don't get the real message from the media because many contradictions are there. But still, we want to get into the truth. Is there any possibility that we can present something to the whole of India, thereby at least we get some gist of what is really happening? For example, recently what is happening in Calcutta, going on and going on. Where is the truth? Who is really instigating things? But we do not know. But there is some truth behind it. How do we go into that? I'm very happy that you are enlightening me on these things, but still I'll be happy if you can just draw the lines where we can really get some genuine information.
Yes, Professor Francis.
Yeah, the
Today,
genuine information.
if you are looking for genuine information today, I don't think that is available. We are living in a world today, very difficult to believe who is saying the truth. For example, what is happening in Calcutta?
Yeah, that's what.
The
Yes.
media is already ideologically biased already. There is Calcutta Telegraph, I suppose. Telegraph, has been a supporter of the secular forces, and therefore I presume it may be neutral, or it may not be also saying, what exactly is happening. Therefore, and of course other media which is supporting the regime or the ruling party, they also they also will not say the truth. And therefore, I made the comment recently that today we do not know whom to believe, with regard to anything that's happening, in our country or in our world today. Because no longer the media is it used to be what it was maybe 30-40 years ago. It is no longer the same, and therefore I don't think, if you are looking for genuine news, I don't think it's available. You have to somehow, through your intuition, your sense of justice, and you have to make up your own mind as to what exactly is happening in our country and all over the world today. And therefore I don't think so there is genuine news, because all the media, first of all, is led by their profit motive. What they want is profit motive and influence, and they want to influence the whichever party is in power. Therefore, I don't think, this is my feeling, genuine information isn't available now or in the future. I don't think so. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
just
so
to
much. Thank you.
yeah,
Thank
just
you.
to add to that, also there's a lot of fear. So, for example, if I want to, in a way, really expose something, then also there is the fear that there may be actions or repercussions of what I'm doing, and this is the fear which, in a way, will stop people from really trying to investigate and bring issues to light. Now, as long as you're in the country, it's very difficult. Now, the reason why Dhruv Rathi has been so effective is because he's not in the country. So that we have to take note. But if you're in the country, it becomes very difficult, because ultimately you have to worry about yourself, your family, and also your work or business. So in that way, I think it's difficult in India.
Yes.
Yes, Francis. Yeah.
Uh, uh, Lindsay, just a question. Just want to know how much percentage of people know that media is biased or pro-regime, and in what way we can kind of inform the public that the mainstream media is pro-regime, or it is pro kind of government. Is there any way we can, in a little way, inform the wider public that it is The media is totally biased now.
Uh, well, in that regard, one of the ways is, I think, well, in some studies have shown that the trust that people have in media can be as low as 30 to 40%. Okay,
Mhm.
so indicating that they believe media outlets are serving government interest or some economic interest other than public.
Okay.
How are the ways that we can, in a way, there was this Pew Research Center. So now in the US, we see that surveys have shown that around 70% of Americans believe that news organizations are biased in their reporting, and many also
Okay.
perceive a liberal or a conservative slant. So depending on the region, this percentage will vary. Now I think only at grassroots levels, if we have kind of these things, awareness, media literacy can help. Professor Francis, you would like to add?
Yeah. So the last point that Lindsay mentioned, media literacy. As far as Francis D'Souza is, yeah, as far as our church in India is concerned, we have been, like, I was always part of it. We have been conducting media awareness program, for our own even young priests and sisters. For so many years, I have been involved. For example, sisters, if they have a tertianship program, then one of the courses could be, media awareness program, and I have conducted many of them. So that's one thing, and then so some of our priests and sisters can be made aware, but how do we make our lay people aware? This is a big challenge, because the lay people doesn't they don't get to attend any of these courses, and therefore it is the lay people who are in majority, and so how do we make them aware? Now, a second point is, we have in India we have only one church magazine, Indian Currents, which is somewhat secular, in a sense that all other magazines that owned by the media church in India, they are all singing the praises of bishops and priests and jubilee, this jubilee, that jubilee, and so forth. They are not serving the purpose of the media, except except is sort of I call it as a sect. It's a sectarian media that we have in India, apart from the Indian Currents, which is owned by the Capuchins, and I've been also associated with that, writing articles, and I knew the editors last many of his editors, and they courageously, very often point out the things happening in India, courageously, and I have always appreciated their courage. And they are the only one media, church media, as far as I can say, that they are making some contribution towards this, making people aware what's happening in India, especially with media and so forth. I think we need to have more, church magazines, and especially to maybe on the diocesan level, we need to, conduct awareness program for our own lay people wherever we can. I think that's the only way we can make them aware. I hope I answered the question for Francis.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There is another hand raised. You can unmute and
there's a hand of Samsung S9.
Can you hear me?
yes,
Yes, yeah.
Can you hear me?
yes, we can hear you.
Okay, my name is Mark Asobi. I'm joining you from Nigerian.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi, Mark. Yes.
Yes, Father. I think I just want to cross-pollinate ideas with your contribution, because to be able to get what is authentic in our news today and in the news headlines, it just depends on how you decode the news headlines. Because our journalists and reporters and media practitioners just create sensations with the headlines. And then the content most often is different from even what is on the headlines, just to attract attention, maybe mislead people, and then get you to be able to read the news item. So it just depends on how you are quotient to be able to decode, know what is right and what is wrong, and then be able to filter and then pilot what is right for the appropriate consumption of the public. That is one of the ways in which, this issue of unmasking media, deconstructing, and then the power behind the headlines is in individuals' ability to decode what is in the headline and be able to enlighten the public appropriately.
Yes. Thank you, Mark, for those valuable comments. Also, just to add, now sometimes when we speak about media education or media studies, sometimes it is just associated with a few, techniques, or maybe learning some softwares or these things. But actually, we also need to include this whole dynamics of media, because if you see, like, the whole media is also like a very you can compare it to a stock market. You need to know what to upload, when to upload, when it is effective. So all these factors play a very important role, which unfortunately most of the education is not hinted in that direction. So that also, I think, if it is included, could contribute to this media literacy or media awareness. Yes, Francis.
So just to add to what you said, I'm totally in agreement, because over the decades that when I used to conduct a media awareness program, many of the participants are interested in technology and learning few techniques, but that's not the media, because I used to tell them that we need to go deeper into understanding the concepts and how the media works, the philosophy behind what we call philosophy of communication. But unfortunately, some of our own young priests and sisters they aren't interested. They just want to learn, technique and technology, which is not really media. That's only one small part of understanding media. Therefore, again, this awareness has to be there in our young priests and sisters and so on, that they need to go deeper. But many of them, when we go deeper into all these things, sometimes they feel it is boring, or they are not interested, or it's not useful for them. So what is useful for them, that's what they want. They don't want to understand the larger concept of how the media works, what is philosophy behind, and so forth. So this is unfortunate. I think even when we are trying to make an awareness of the media, this is happening. The unfortunate part. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Let's listen to some others. Alok, Robin, Lenin, Branko, anyone would like to comment or give your opinion?
Yeah,
Yes,
good evening,
continue.
Father.
Good evening.
Yeah, today, as I did, I studied journalism in my degree studies. Uh, in today India, what's happening is sensationalism. If it bleeds, it actually leads the news. Only if there should be sensation, it should bleed, then it leads. That's what we are going towards today. That sensationalism is one of the most important aspect what media is taking up. That is one thing. Another is most of the youngsters are going towards a news fatigue. What we call this sensationalism makes them so tired they do not want to read the news. But why do we need to? Negativity makes them somewhat distance themselves from the news. That's what I feel. Two of these two things what I wanted to share.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. Uh, yes, Alok.
Yeah, good evening. I'm Father Alok. I belong to IMS congregation. I am based in Varanasi. I'm happy to participate in this webinar. Yes, wonderful. And I feel media education is a must for today's youth and also religious sisters and fathers and all everybody, sisters also. media is really biased. All of us know it, and if because of lack of media education, what is happening is now people are simply influenced. Youth are influenced, even the educated people are influenced easily, and how we are treated, that aspect is not taken care. So therefore, I would suggest that we take up media education, especially the priests and nuns and even the youth level, so that a sort of rational thinking comes in. Otherwise, we are just go with the wind. A sort of advertisement is there, and we fall into. So that is my comment on this. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I think also we need to create this ability to think critically rather
Yes,
than just
that is
going
lacking.
with the flow. That is, yes.
Thank you very much. I
Yes.
just want you to highlight on that fear element and there's some touch me not element that creeps into us when you want to question certain things, but this fear element comes in because you are observed. What you are saying is recorded and the whole media is following. So can you enlighten on that, please?
Yeah, so let me give you a small example. For example, when if you're posting something on YouTube, say, if you're making a video, there are certain number of guidelines, community guidelines that you have to follow, which also include, like, controversial issues. So there are certain declarations that you have to make. So that is one kind of things that you have to take care of. Secondly, the local area. So for example, if you're saying something against the current government, okay, then you see that already the news is already kind of scrutinized. There are people who are actually watching what has been said, where it has been said. You can be easily tracked down. Even your activity, your browsing activity can be tracked down. That can be used against you. So now, for an average person, okay, the whole question is, why do I want to invite trouble to myself? That is the general thinking. So that is something which also stops people from, though the urge is there, though something wrong is happening, you want to do something, but you're also thinking about yourself. Because obviously, even if you have the best of the lawyers, sometimes it may be difficult. So for example, just the stand up comedians, they often face a number of FIRs, number of lawsuits, because they tend to speak on, or they just tend to critique or humor on certain of these issues. So again, something as humor, if that can lead to an FIR or a lawsuit, then if then even presenting some authentic information is even much more. So yes. So unfortunately, that is the sorry state that we are in.
Yeah, it's very sad, very sad. Thank you. Thank you very
Yes.
much.
Lenin or Robin?
Yeah, hello, am I audible?
Yes, yes. Continue.
Yeah, I was. Thank you very much for the invite. Actually, we are living in a stage where we need more of these kinds of information. Like, where do you get right information, or actually, is there actually authentic information? I was while listening to the presentation, I was just wondering, do the media actually follow up? See, for example, if they give a news, you know, do they really actually follow up, or they just want to sensationalize? When there is one news comes up, and then every media goes after that, and then for example, if one person facing an allegation from another person, rather than clearing on that aspect, when sensation news comes in, they goes after that. For example, if a media house argument is wrong, or they falsely accuse a person, or a group, will they come up actually and apologize? that is one thing that just came up to my mind. While also, I was also checking the number of news channels in my TV. Like there are 10 news channels at currently. So as you were saying, will all these uh, news house or the media houses will actually own up the responsibility of arguments and criticism? So will there be an apology? For example, if an argument is wrong or an allegation is later found out to be wrong, will they apologize? Have you ever seen anything of that sort? That is the one thing I was really wanted to know from any source, because I have a 11-year-old daughter. If I wanted to show show her that these are the news channels you can watch, and I'm wondering, I won't suggest any news channels for that matter, because the credibility for that matter, I don't know whether they really own up and add to that ethical dimension to it. It's just mostly business and sensationalization, and then political affiliations do drive them. That's what I believe. Thank you.
Yes. So to answer to some of these things now, being a content creator on YouTube, from my experience, I know that it is the thumbnail that speaks a lot. So sometimes we see that thumbnail is one thing, but the information inside is completely different. That is one way of attracting viewers to come. Secondly, we see that one thing also which irritates me a lot is sometimes you have one particular issue is given, the same thing is actually screen captured. Now it's very easy to screen capture, but that is done and put on different other channels have the same thing going on. So the whole thing here is we need to understand is the money that is involved, this whole monetization issue. Also it is who puts first. So sometimes the in the race of getting there first, you may not even sometimes go to check your facts, because why? That will take time. And if before that somebody else puts, he will get more views, and you will not, your news will not be that effective. So this whole money or monetization, this race to be the first, is something that affects this or leads to this sensationalization. You want to create something which will attract the audience. Secondly, do news agencies own up? Unless there is a lawsuit or unless there is a defamation case, I'm not sure how many of these agencies would own up, because why? It then also will uh, affect the credibility of the news. So even if they own up, I don't think so it will be a public thing. It may be a more of at a personal, at a local level, rather than making a general nationwide apology. So again, these are, I think, some issues. Others can feel free to add to this. Yes, Mark.
No, really, I think following your explanation, it's actually been a very misleading scenario that is playing around the globe, and particularly in some specific countries. It has really led to a kind of a laxity in the media profession, in the media industry, that a lot of media practitioners do not really do what is referred to as investigative journalism. They just get involved into this copy and paste, and that to a very large extent misleads the public a lot, because you have just one news item being replicated in different medias, in different print and mass media. So if something can be done to tip the tack on this train, so that people can still get back into some form of real investigative journalism where some level of effort is put into their work and the public is properly guided. Because a little misinformation can lead to lots of challenges and troubles, and then misguided direction to the public, and that can lead to some form of brain drain, some form of crisis, and some form of misinterpretation of intent by those who originally have the news item to float. So I think some form of sensitization and education will be required in this light by media practitioners to be able to correct and stem this stack.
Yes. Thank you, Mark.
Do we have time still to?
Yeah, if there is some this thing, we can still go ahead. There's no problem. If
Yeah, just one more thing to add, because the 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 monetary aspect you were mentioning, right?
yes,
In the form of advertisements, for example, most of the media houses have some of the issues, they deliberately keep away from the viewers, that might affect their advertisement, sort of,
yes,
the economic side of it. See, some channels, some independent channels, or some independent broadcasters, they bring these issues into limelight. But that they were like very very negligible kind of stuff, because without this advertisement and all those monetary side of it, no media house can work. That is the way they work. And then most of the, if some of the advertisement groups, I mean, if they have a problem, nobody is, if we are a media house and you are telecasting their advertisement, and you will mostly keep a deliberate silence on that sometimes.
yes. Yeah, I think it's evident because sometimes we see that certain news is just sidelined and something else is brought in to just distract the attention. So this has been happening quite a lot in our country. So yes, that is also, those interests are there. Uh, are there any more interventions? If not, we can wind up for today.
Just one
Yeah.
one doubt actually. How often do you? It's a monthly discussion, or
See, we have at SNRI three kind of online forums. So one is this Wisdom Waves, where we take an issue and we take some philosophical methods to kind of look into it. Next week, next Wednesday, we have something called as YR, where again a question is posed, a reflection is given on it, and then we try to see how we can get over it. So, for example, once we had this issue on, is the freedom that we have really free? Are we really free, or is it a delusional freedom? And then you have a small presentation followed by discussions like this. So we do take these philosophical topics, relevant topics, and this thing. Then we also have another book on technology where we also use. So you can also check our other links which are there. So we have certain three programs, online programs are there every month.
yeah, okay, I'll do check with it and
Yes.
try to follow as much as I can.
Okay, thank you. Yes. So
Thank you very much.
yes,
Thank you so much.
thank you.
Thank
Thank
So
you.
Thank you so
yes,
much.
thank you. Yes, thank you for joining. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and reflections. And see you next time. Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening.
Yes, you too.